All right, so my goal with this exercise is to take this multi-view drawing that has some measurements or dimensions on it and turn this into an actual 3D object in Onshape. So I'm going to ask that you follow along with me as I'm going through this process. So the first thing I want to decide is whether I'm going to use what we call the additive or the subtractive process for this. The additive process is basically where I start with some smaller pieces and then kind of keep adding those together to get my final object. The subtractive process you can kind of think about more like sculpture, where you start with a big block of something and you like remove it away until you get the thing that you want. So we're going to use the additive process today. As I look at this object, I can see from the front view that it's basically like an L shape. And I actually know the sizes or dimensions that I need for that front L shape, so that's what I'm going to start with. Since I'm starting with my front view on my drawing, I'm going to start over here on my front view of the object as well, or in Onshape. I'm going to go to my front view here in the view cube, and I'm going to choose to make a new sketch on the front plane. Now to start off with, I need to think about what this front shape looks like. And it basically looks like an L shape, so we could think of it like a rectangle with a square stacked on top of it. So that's how I'm going to approach making this. I'm going to come up here in my sketch tools, and I'm going to say I want a corner rectangle. And I'm going to make this bottom wide rectangle first. I can see up here that its width is 2.25, and I can see down here that its height is 0.75. So I'm going to drag my little rectangle out. Oops, let me redo that actually. I want to make sure that it's starting on the origin. It's not going to be a big deal in this case, but just in general, it's good practice to start with the origin when we're starting a new object. So let me try that again. I'm going to make, oh my goodness, I'm messing it up again. Let's try that one more time. I'm going to start on the origin, there we go. And I'm going to say, based on my drawing, it's 2.25 inches wide, and it's 0.75 inches high. So that's like the starting rectangle that I'm working with. Now the next thing I need to know is, okay, well how big is that little cube? How big is that little cube that, or square that sort of sits on top of it? And for this I have to do something called a derived dimension. And what that means is, there's nothing sitting over to the side of this that shows me how tall this is, but I know the overall height is 1.5, and I know the height of this section is 0.75, so that means that I take 1.5 minus 0.75, and that gives me the derived dimension. That means I know, okay, whatever's left over is also 0.75. So that's 0.75 high. Now, if I look at my top view, I can already see I've got a measurement that shows how wide that thing is. It's 0.75. So I know that this square is 0.75 high by 0.75 wide. So I'm going to take my rectangle tool again. This part I want to make sure you really see. This part is going to be really important. I want to make sure that I'm connecting this new square to the existing rectangle. So when I hover my mouse over this, I want you to make sure you're looking. When I hover my mouse over this, I want to make sure that I get that little orange square that kind of highlights along that corner point. That's where I'm going to start my new drawing from. And like I said, it's 0.75 by 0.75. So what I've got now, if you compare what I've got in Onshape to what I've got in my drawing, is that I have the front view of the object, right? So at this point, I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click the green check mark, and I'm going to go to my isometric view. Because I know that this thing has a particular depth. What I need to figure out is, what depth does it have? When I say depth, by the way, I want you to make sure you're looking at this, because this is one of those like really crucial concepts that people sometimes have a hard time kind of getting their brains around. This top view of the object shows me the object's depth or thickness. In other words, it goes from the front of the object to the back of the object. And when we're talking about the front to the back of something, that's its depth, or you sometimes might say thickness, right? So the overall thickness of this object, or depth of this object, is 1.5 inches. I also wrote down a measurement that said that this depth from the front of that little cube there to the main sort of rectangle is 0.75 inches. So again, using that like derived dimension, I can say, well, this depth of this part right here is 0.75 as well. So over in Onshape, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, I know I want to extrude this part 0.75 inches. And all I did was just click on the rectangle and the square, both, and I'm going to type in how far, how deep that extrude is. It's 0.75. So I'm going to click the green checkbox once I've extruded that. And this looks pretty good. If I look at it just from the front, it looks identical to my drawing. So that's awesome. The problem is, if I look at it from my top view, I can see that I'm missing a part, right? I can see that I'm missing this part over here, that little single cube that sort of sticks out at the bottom there. And so this is what I'm talking about when I say the additive method. You could also see the same kind of thing from the right view, by the way. You can see that I've got this main part, but I'm missing this cube that sticks out towards the front of the object. So when I say that we're going to use the additive method, what I have to do here is I have to make a new sketch on top of something else that I already made and do another extrude. All right? So I know that that little cube needs to stick out at the front bottom left corner here. So I'm going to go to my front view and make another sketch. And this time I'm going to say I want to sketch on the face of that thing that I already extruded. I'm going to make another rectangle. And here's where sometimes people get confused or a little bit stuck. So let me highlight this in Onshape. I'm going to start at the origin, and I'm going to drag up so that it connects with this dot here. Do you see the orange dot that's highlighting right there? Because I'm connecting point to point here, do you see how when I drag that out, it already says 0.75 inches? That's because that's the distance it already has on there. Now, if I tried to type something else in, Onshape would lose its mind. It would freak out because I'm trying to tell it two different things at the same time. I'm trying to tell it that the square goes from this point to this point, and I'm also trying to tell it it has these dimensions. And I can only kind of have one of those things at a time. Since I'm telling it it's connecting those 2 points, I don't need to do anything. In fact, you can see it started freaking out already because it assumed that I wanted to put in measurements. If I want to get rid of how it turned red, all I have to do is click on the dimension and literally delete it away. Because Onshape already has connected those two things up. So we're good there. We don't need to worry about it. What I do need to do, though, is go back to my top view or my right view and say, okay, how far out does that one little cube go? And we can see here on the drawing that it goes 0.75 inches out. I'm going to go to my isometric. I'm going to go and extrude one more time. I'm going to click on just that top cube, or that bottom left cube, which it already had it, and I'm going to extrude that one out 0.75 inches. Now I can click the green check. So now I can do a quick check to make sure that I've got it correct. I knew already that it looked correct from the front view, but I want to double check one more time. Does that still look correct from the front view? Yeah, that still looks good. Does it still look correct from the top view, or does it look correct now from the top view, rather? Compare those two things. Yep, that looks good. And then one more time, does it look correct on the right view? If it looks correct on all three of those views, you've got it. You've made the object correctly. Okay? So if you've had a chance to practice along with the video, hopefully your object looks like this as well.